Hello, my fellow escapists, and welcome to another war story / trip report. Tonight's one is the one that I've held off for a very long time. It is my most powerful acid trip experience. The reason I held off on it for so long is because talking about it in the past year probably would have been too hard for me. The reason why is because this story includes my fiance that recently passed away, but luckily I've come to grounds where I'm able to talk about it more. This night was based in October 27th, 2017. This trip affected multiple relationships because of how powerful it was for each of the individuals that were present. During October 2017, I was working at a fast food chicken joint, the same one that I worked at in the mushroom trip video where I tripped at work. And the trip that I'm about to talk about wasn't too long after that experience. Me and a friend named Raina that I met in 2014 had started talking more during the summer of 2017. We got close and we eventually had a relationship, but it wasn't anything too serious until after the event of October 27th. At the time, her father and her both worked with me at the fast food joint. However, this night they were both off, but I was still working. Raina's best friend Hannah and my best friend Jonah wanted to trip with us as well, so we had this all planned out. After I got off work, I would be coming over. One of my coworkers could get some really good acid, and he sold me 7 hits, but I only took 6. Of course, I learned my lesson from the mushroom trip, not to trip while working. I waited until closing hours because it would come up as soon as I'd be getting off. Jonah and Hannah were already at Raina's house. Her father, her, and those two were all tripping on some acid that they bought. The heroic dose doesn't come in until after I take more, because I initially started out with 600 micrograms, but I ended up taking more later with Jonah. I'm not entirely sure how much they took. I know that it was all around 1-2 hits. Her father took 3 hits. Hannah took like 1 or 2. Jonah took 1 or 2, or I think he slowly microdosed more and more by using halves. Raina took initially only 1 hit, I believe, but she ended up taking the other one that I saved for her after buying it from my friend. Now, before even getting off, I was already getting messages about how the night was going, pictures, so I sent them a picture back of me with Lucy on my tongue, in my work uniform, in the back of the kitchen. Back then, I had bleached blonde hair, more of a baby face, and skull ear piercings. Raina was telling me how much she wanted me there because Jonah was telling her that she was acting negative and making the vibe dark, whatever the fuck that means. Now, I understand that some people and some things can bring you down on acid, but to be the one that mentions that, you're only making things worse. And it's just really smug in general because she has tripped more than he has, and he was talking to her like he was some kind of trip elite, when the only time he's tripped before that is whenever I gave him a hit and introduced him to psychedelics. And no, I don't deserve a pat on the back for introducing it to him. It's just the principle of how he was talking to her, as if he was some experienced psychonaut or something. To mention that someone else is making the vibe dark just because you feel that way is kind of a dick move, because you're now moving that energy onto everyone else in the room that may or may not feel that way as well. He then went on to say that everything's a dick measuring contest with me because I was telling them about how much I took. Apparently that means that I'm trying to be better than them. No, all it means is that I was reporting the dose to them because I was very nervous since I had not taken that much in a while. When I arrived, I went down the hallway to her dad's room and they were both chilling in there, Raina and him. He was playing on the guitar and we were all talking and having a good time. Jonah and Hannah had requested to be in her room for a little bit for their alone time, which I feel is kind of disgusting after saying that she was making the vibe dark, which will only make her feel even more rejected, especially since you're in her house. Honestly, really, really shitty. But it's fine, because they missed out on some really nice guitar playing that her father was doing in the room. I was in a trance, and I believe Raina was too. I gave her the hit that I had saved, and we continued talking while her father was still playing music. The trip has been coming up since I left work, and at this point, I started feeling a little dissociated, but not in a dissociative drug type sense, but as in, I can feel an ego death coming on. I kind of forgot where I was, but I felt this loving energy around me. Everything was much more vibrant, and music was godly. Raina said that I had kept dozing off looking at the ceiling, and I do remember why. As I was staring at the ceiling, the cross between where the ceiling and wall meets started having this leaking clock. It just looked like a bunch of Roman numerals, like fluctuating against the ceiling, connecting to the wall. It's so hard to explain, but it was beautiful. The saturation of the room was bright in the best way ever. It was as if the color temperature was only bright. An amber glow from an unknown source was around my eyes. That would pop in and out, and the visuals when I closed my eyes were getting even more powerful. I would continuously see the Roman numerals, and it was just an intense feeling. It was almost like I was seeing time stop, and that's what my mind drew a conclusion to from seeing clocks. I remember going to the living room and spending alone time with her. She kept telling me that my energy was that of a really nice person, that she can see the true me, and that I was beautiful. I told her some nice things back as I was gazing at the ceiling, remembering that I was a person, and that was so odd to me. The almost alive abstract wallpaper was very alluring to look at, but it didn't distract me from the thought loop that was going in my head about how I'm a human, and it makes no sense, but who am I? I would start to forget my name, and I forget hers, but that didn't matter. I still knew I cared for this person, and that's whenever the care started growing. I felt even closer to her. Acid can very well distort your perception of time, but I knew based off of my phone's clock that Hannah and Jonah were in her room for a little too long. It's almost as if they just abandoned her to hang out at her house because they weren't allowed to hang out at each other's. And that thought loop stayed in my head, and it only served to anger me. Being angry on acid is a very weird emotion. Me and Raina were ready to spend our alone time together, but we weren't gonna do it on the living room couch. So I stood up, went down the hallway, and surprisingly she didn't stop me whenever I banged on the door and told them to get out. They said something along the lines of "hold on," and that angered me more, because that implies that they have some kind of entitlement to her room. The mild ego death that I was experiencing in the moment was enough to make me think that these people were strangers being assholes. So I kept kicking the door, and it finally opened. They walked out and went to the living room. Quickly after entering the room, me and Raina noticed that the room was left smelling similar to the scent of star-kissed tuna. We both kind of gagged and laughed a little bit. The bed was littered with coloring books and colored pencils. The thought hit me fast that why didn't they invite her to color with them? Why were they using her room to hang out alone instead of hanging out with her? I was right. My theory was correct. They were using her as a place to hang out. I moved aside the coloring pencils and coloring books off the bed, and I put my phone's flash on to give a dim light in the room, instead of turning on the overhead. I put on a band I liked at the time called The Bad Light, which was really fun to listen to while tripping. We did our own things for about an hour, before leaving the room to go check if Hannah and Jonah were still there. Well, of course they are. Raina asked me if I can buy her a pack of cigarettes, and of course I oblige. Jonah wants to walk with me. Me and Jonah walked to the nearest gas station, and the whole time he was seemingly talking to me in a very condescending manner, but I brushed it off. Halfway there, he offered me a hit that he had saved for me. Of course, I took it, without even thinking about it. Of course, it crossed my mind a couple times. How much is this one hit gonna add to the rest of my trip? When we got back to the house, I gave Raina her cigarettes and she hugged me. We all four sat in the room, and we took a photo with Hannah's Polaroid camera. I was playing some music over my Bluetooth CAN speaker, and Jonah mentions that the music is kind of dark, or subtly he'll make fun of Raina's music, which is usually rap, but she played a lot of David Bowie too. She even had a tattoo on her arm of him as a zombie. When I let Jonah play his music through my speaker, I decided to be a little asshole back by saying that his music was the type of music that attention-seeking teenage girls listen to before cutting themselves. Now, mind you, I don't think self-harm is funny at all, especially since I knew that Raina had some self-harm habits. But I decided a little bit of banter wouldn't hurt, and Raina, of course, laughed her ass off to my remark. I put a song on by Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats called Melody Lane, and we took more pictures on the Polaroid camera. I started getting very hot and sweaty, so I took off my shirt, and I lit a cigarette. Raina then snapped a photo of me on the Polaroid camera that she actually kept for a very long time afterwards. The mirror that Raina had in her room was giant. I stood up and stared into it, noticing that my face was contorting into that of a reptile. My eyes contorted into that of a snake's. My mouth grew flat and scaly, and all other kinds of things. Of course, when I looked away, everything would stop contorting and it would go back to the normal visuals that I was having before. But as I would stare in the mirror for more than 10 seconds, it would keep coming back just like that, which is one of the most powerful visuals I've ever had on acid. As the sun peered out in the early morning, I decided to lay down with Raina, and we chatted and listened to music. Hannah and Jonah decided to go to the park and swing a little bit. After a couple hours, I passed out next to Raina. Raina told me the next day that Jonah had tried to come in and grab markers, and he kept trying to drop them by my feet to wake me up because he wanted to hang out more. Which is very odd because he had already come down at that point, so I don't know what more he wanted to squeeze out of that day. I then woke up whenever Raina snapped at him to get out that I was trying to sleep, and she told me to go back to sleep. I didn't know why she had done it until she told me that. It was hard enough to get to sleep as it was, so being woke up after finally getting there, it was pretty discouraging, so I decided to stay up a little bit. This next day I had no serotonin left, but me and Raina decided to buy some weed. And for some reason, after that day, Jonah and Hannah had abandoned me and Raina, never spoke to us again. Which was fine by us, because during that trip, we saw what kind of people they really were. And it didn't bother us too much. Well, it didn't bother me too much. But Raina was kind of heartbroken that her best friend decided to say fuck you. Of course, Hannah would pop back into her life throughout the years whenever it was on her time, but I don't consider that a friendship. But after that day, me and Raina stayed by each other's side for the longest time. She moved in with me, and we continued our relationship. But it's safe to say that life is not a fantasy land. Life can never be that happy trip always. It is dark. Real life is merciless. It doesn't care about your feelings. It will not go the way that you plan it to be. Sometimes it may, sometimes it won't. That's called being a realist, is to understand that. Rest in peace to Raina, and I hope her family stays strong throughout this grief, because I know it's been hard as hell for me. And that's the story of the trip of 10/27/2017. The strongest acid trip I've had to date. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a good night.